things a little bit differently. So there will be some familiar things in different places and some new things too. For instance, usually we do our affirmation of faith a little later in the service, but for this series, we're doing it a little bit earlier. I invite you to join me in speaking the words of our affirmation of faith. The words should be on your screen and in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church.
Service is his prayer, and this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
We realize that not everyone can attend in person, so we are streaming this worship service online, and we extend a special welcome to those who are joining us virtually. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break from streaming at that time. Other than that, the service will be recorded and available for future viewing on our website. We are about to enter sacred time. We are about to make this time and this place sacred by our presence and intention. Please turn off or silence your devices, and as you do so, I invite you also to turn down the volume on our fears, to remove our masks, and to loosen the armor around our hearts. Don't take my word for it. Do it as slowly as you need to. If you take a little risk with these good people, you may find that they have the same human needs as you do. Breathe. Let go of the expectations placed on you by others and those they taught you to place on yourself. Drop the guilt and the shame, not to shirk accountability, but in honest expectation of the policy of forgiveness. Let go of the thing you said the other day. Let go of the thing you dread next week. Be here in this moment. Breathe here. Please join me in the lighting of the chalice. We gather this hour as people of faith.
With joys and sorrows, gifts and needs, we light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
So this morning, in this worship series, we'll be inviting you to do some exploration and sharing with one another. which might feel a little uncomfortable or awkward, but that is totally okay. We're not about being perfect. We're about showing up with our best efforts and learning together. Our covenant is inherently forgiving. And even when it is broken, even then, we still seek restoration and renewal. Stumbling is wholeheartedly welcomed along this path. And so in that spirit, may we lean into the productive discomfort that makes possible all learning and growth and community. I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our recovenanting, where I will read a couple sections of our behavioral covenant, and I invite you to respond with the words that are up on our screen here. For all the ways that we have neglected to participate in the life of our congregation, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For all the ways that we have not supported the goals of the congregation, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. For all the ways that we have not accepted and civilly engaged with challenging situations, may we forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. Now, I invite you to open your teal hymnals to number 1003 for Where Do We Come From? Join in song.
1003, the teal hymnal. You'll notice that we are repeating each of the lines, and we're going to come back to this hymn throughout this series. Today we're just going to do it in unison, the entire thing twice through. The words will be on in your hymnals and also on the screen. Where do we come from? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going?
Please be seated. It is the holidays. It is a time of year when many folks gather with friends, with family, and oftentimes we miss folks that we're not able to gather with. So it's this time of great joy and oftentimes also great sorrow. And in this middle time in between Christmas and the turning of the new year, as we gather in this sanctuary together, there's an opportunity to bring some of those riches into this space. What have you been carrying in your heart? What can we help you carry that might lift us all up, or that might be easier to carry together? And so I'll come around with the microphone, and I'd invite you to share a joy or a sorrow with us, or both, and just that you share your name with us so that we know who you are. Does anybody have a joy or a sorrow this morning? connected to a number of things that we've talked about over the past few years. Initially, one of the things that it's tied into is me being here as the minister in this congregation, which is connected to a desire by many folks in the congregation to grow the church and be an even more thriving, active community than we already are. But there is this question of, well, why is it exactly that way? Like, what kind of thriving, and why is the growth of the church important, and all of those sorts of things that we've been tossing around with the board last year and the Committee on Shared Ministry. And so one of the pieces of the board's vision for our ministry this year is to root our desire for growth through celebration of Unitarian Universalism within the congregation and in diverse public spaces. And so to serve that, this worship service will be weaving together some of these worship threads that we've been working on these past couple years. Last year, this time, we talked about some Unitarians and Universalists from history, and just after that, how our society allocates resources and perpetuates injustice and what choices we can make in light of that. And this past fall, we talked about place, and what does it mean to be in a place and to be in this place together. And just before that, we took a look at conscious relationships and what patterns do we want to continue and what patterns do we want to disrupt. And so over this series, we'll be looking at what historical patterns and legacies surround us and run through us in this land in which we all live, and what choices we can make that might heal the histories that haunt us, whether we are aware of them or not. At our best, we Unitarian Universalists practice mixing with many different kinds of people and thriving in that diversity. But in order to do that, to truly welcome diversity, we need to go on both inward and outward journeys of transformation. An inward journey that deconstructs our own misconceptions and habits of which we might not even be conscious, and an outward journey that focuses on deepening relationships and practicing restorative solidarity. And so, in that light, I invite you to be conscious of sharing this room with a diversity of people. In some ways, we are very much alike. In some ways, we're very different. And just to look around this room and maybe to greet your neighbors by waving your hands, letting the warmth of your smile fill the space between us. It's okay, go ahead. You can greet your neighbors, let the warmth of your smile fill the space between us, yes. So these folks we're gonna do some brief sharing with, and whether you're sitting next to somebody or maybe you might need to scooch a little bit, in groups of 2 or 3, you can just kind of organize. We're going to discuss a question together for just 2 minutes, and I'll keep track of it. So it's just 2 minutes. It's very, very brief. This is not a long discussion. And the question is, so each of us has some feeling that there are places in the world where we should be and other places in the world where we shouldn't be. And so think of an example for each of those, a place in the world where you feel like you should be, and another place where you feel like you shouldn't be. And so we'll have a brief piece of music for you to just kind of consider that and think about that. And then once Jeremy is done playing, then I will invite you all to share with one another a place where in the world where you feel like you should be, and a place in the world where you feel like you shouldn't be. So during the music, just think to yourselves, and once Jeremy is done playing, then we'll come back to discuss. Okay, so now the time for discussion starts. And I will keep track of the 2 minutes for you to just share briefly with each other a place in the world where you feel like you should be and a place where you feel like you shouldn't. Whichever. Okay, so that's the 2 minutes. And so would anybody like to share into the space either something that you said yourself or maybe something that you heard somebody else say that struck you? Maybe something that you said yourself or maybe something that the person you were talking to shared about a place that they felt like they should be or shouldn't be. Just a couple folks just to share with us about that experience. Yeah.
Well, we were both since we both have grandkids who live on the other side of the country. We both were saying that we would have liked to have spent time with them. I mean, I have a daughter and son-in-law and 2 grandkids in Brooklyn, and she has 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren in Seattle. But we were here instead.
So you should be able to be with them, but
Yes.
you're not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and then we also talked about how the fact that, you know, when you get older, your kids want to take care of you. I mean, and it's great that they want to do that, but then like giving up your life here, which you've established and you enjoy, and moving across the country would not be something you'd want to do. So,
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah. 1 or 2 other folks. What came up in your conversations with folks? I hear some energy from this side of the room. Yeah.
We were just discussing in general terms on the inside feeling that we get where we are when we leave that area. And if it's a warm, the world is a better place because I was there feeling, then we know we should have been there. And if we leave that group of people or that certain area that we were, and we get sort of an icky feeling inside that maybe we contributed to some lowering of frequencies, then we think, maybe we don't go back there. We don't hate the people or the area, but maybe we just spend more time in the vibration raising area instead.
Thank you, Tony. One more person. Yeah, great.
So this is something that I've been thinking about for the entire fall. So it was something, you know, I was thinking of not being happy where I was working. Been reading a lot, very limited amount of time left, thinking, you know, is this how I want to spend this limited amount of time? And I read, as I was making that decision, I read a very good book, a number of really good books, but one was really interesting, and he said, we are stressed because we know we have a limited amount of time, and all this time management is just not going to work. But you have to ask yourself, and I already decided to quit a job I've been doing for 20 years, teaching, and because it was just getting, you know, when you get into that zone of, you know, you've been doing it for 20 years, so you just keep putting up with things and putting things. He said something like, you have to ask yourself, not does this make me happy, but does this enrich me or diminish me? And then I had decided, but when I read that, I thought, well, that's the right decision, right? You got to get out of a place that diminishes you and make a leap, because, you know, you're leaving 20 years and financial security and things like that, but it's the right decision. But I think that's just a great question to ask yourself if you're in the right place or not. Is it, like you said, is it diminishing me or is it enriching me? Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah. Excellent.
And now please rise in body or spirit for first a reading and then to go right into singing together our doxology. Because of those who came before, we are. In spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their visions, we too dream.
seated.
And now I want to do a reading. It's called The Shattering of the Vessels. At the beginning of time, before anything else existed, love was all there was. And it filled up everything in the whole universe. But love got bored and lonely. There was no one to be in love with. So one day, love decided to make a world. First, it took a deep breath. Can we all take a deep breath together? Come on. How deep? Keep going. Keep going. Let me see. Let me see. Deeper. 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 Yes! Love got all squished up, taking the deepest breath ever. And was so squished that it squeezed out darkness. And the darkness was all around. It was thick, shiny, and black. I mean, it was beautiful. But now, love couldn't see anything. So love waved its arms and its legs around. But the darkness was everywhere by now. I have to do something about this, love said. And it thought for a minute. And it tried to think of the most wonderful, beautiful, warm thoughts ever. Love thought harder and harder. And all of a sudden, love called out, "I want light!" Pop! She already knew. All of the warm and wonderful and beautiful thoughts exploded outward in 10 different directions and shaped themselves into 10 big glowing glass balls. Each ball was filled with a spinning lump of pure light and warmth. Some of the spare good thoughts that couldn't quite fit into the glass became dust and water and vapor and seeds and molecules that could form animals. And love said, "This is pretty amazing. I better make something for the light to shine on now." So it waved its arms and kicked its legs, and all of the dust and water and vapor and molecules that had been scattered around when I'm sorry, I lost my place. I better make something for the light to shine on now. So it waved its arm, the water vapor and molecules that had been scattered around when the glass balls formed began to form into another huge ball. Oh, that's why, because this is very important. This one of dirt and water, and plants and animals. Love called this one Earth. The 10 balls of light started towards Earth. And if they had made it there in one piece, the entire planet would have been exactly the way love wanted it. But the glass balls were too fragile to contain such a strong and powerful and wonderful good thoughts. They broke open and they shattered. And all the good thoughts shattered and flew out of like sparks that were scattered like sand, like seeds, like stars everywhere. Those sparks fell everywhere on Earth in tiny little bits instead of the big clumps like love intended. "Oh no," said love. "I'm too big. I can never be able to go down there and find all those little tiny sparks. I have to make one more thing now." So love waved its arm and kicked its feet one last time, and people appeared on the earth. They didn't know it, but they were created for one job: to find these sparks, these tiny little pieces of wonderful goodness, to bring them together again into those big clumps. When enough clumps are there, I will recreate the big glass containers and to hold them, and this time I will set them down just a little more carefully, love said. So, all of us, from the time that we were born, we have a job.
And that job is to help find love and more good and warm and wonderful things. And if we are doing that, we are fixing the world.
Now please rise and bow your spirit to join in singing hymn number 1007. There is a river flowing in my soul. 1007.
Please be seated. My last year of college, I was taking this class at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, and we had a school trip, a class trip there's this class with about 50 people in it, and most of us went to the Highlander Center in eastern Tennessee, and I got a ride from them, thankfully, to the bus station afterwards, because I was going to take the bus from that trip to go somewhere else, and the professors were nice enough to give me a ride, and we were driving around, and they were going to drop me off, and they said, "Are you sure that this feels okay?" Because I was being dropped off in downtown Knoxville, and I didn't know downtown Knoxville at all. And I said, yeah. The only times I've ever felt unsafe was, some parts of New York City and some parts of the south side of Chicago. And they pointed out to me, "Are you aware of how much of that is related to your own privilege?" And at the time I said, "Oh, sure," because I wanted to seem like I knew everything and I was totally on board with what was going on. But I thought about it. I sat with that question for a good long time about how much I have a tendency to feel physically safe in the spaces that I'm in. That I, as a white man, had at that time primarily felt physically unsafe in communities that are occupied by folks who don't look like me. And not even consciously, because there aren't as many white people around, but on an unconscious level of just looking around the place and perceiving the differentness, feeling on some subconscious level that the space that I was in was not welcoming to me in the ways with which I was familiar. And having female friends who are scared to go walking alone at night, or having friends of color who have come too close to having their lives taken by police officers. There are places that each of us feel safe. There are places that each of us feel unsafe. There are messages that we've absorbed about where we should be and where we shouldn't be. And on some level, this is in our consciousness in a way that it may not have been as much with the protests that have been going on in recent years. Author Adrienne Murray Brown has written, "Things are not getting worse. They are being unveiled." In one of Martin Luther King's books, he wrote, "For too long, the depth of racism in American life has been underestimated. The surgery necessary to extract it is necessarily complex and detailed. As a beginning, it is necessary to x-ray our history and reveal the full extent of the disease. Our nation was born in genocide," he writes, "when it embraced the doctrine that the original American, the Indian, was an inferior race. Even before there were large numbers of Negroes on our shore, the scar of racial hatred had already disfigured colonial society. From the 16th century forward, blood flowed in battles over racial superiority," he continues. "We are perhaps the only nation which tried as a matter of national policy to wipe out its indigenous population. Moreover, we elevated that tragic experience into a noble crusade. Indeed, even today, we have not permitted ourselves to reject or feel remorse for this shameful episode. Our literature, our films, our drama, our folklore all exalt it. It is this tangled web of prejudice from which many Americans now seek to liberate themselves, without realizing how deeply it has been woven into their consciousness. How deeply it is woven into our consciousness. We live on a land and in a society that exists in the aftermath of what some would call a genocide, although the term didn't exist back then. And so what do we do with that? And what's the importance of doing something with that? Well, partly that it's not just the past. I grew up in Meriden, Connecticut, and the school that I was in used the tracking system, and I was in some of the grade level classes and some of the honors level classes. And it wasn't something that I probably would have thought to put words to at the time, but I was very aware of the people that I was in those honors level classes with, and the people who were in the remedial classes, and the people who were in the below level classes. There was already a sort of de facto segregation going on within the school, which the school itself was fairly diverse. And the same thing in the town of Meriden that I was in. There was this part of town where these folks lived, and this part of town where these folks lived. And the same thing in Connecticut, which is one of the wealthiest states in the country, depending on where you go. Also some of the poorest inner cities in the country. And similarly around here, whether you're in Gary or Sherville, you can look around and get a different sense of where you are. There was a gathering that I got together with other local clergy who shared about their experiences of not feeling safe depending on which side of County Line Road they were on. And these ideas, these concepts, these norms that aren't even spoken to explicitly, they're in the movies and TV shows that we're aware of. Everything from the 40s and through the 60s that's portrayed in movies presents this idea of normal society. And so when we see something that conflicts with that, we're startled. There's a continual message of who we are and who gets to be included in the we. That town that I grew up in, Meriden, Connecticut, had a fairly large Puerto Rican population. And there was this one family that lived across the street that was Puerto Rican, and they had this huge American flag hanging on their house. And at one point I said to my mom, like, isn't that kind of weird that they have the one American flag? Like the Puerto Ricans across the street? And I had no consciousness of where I might have gotten that sense from, that Puerto Rico, which is actually part of the United States, would be any less American than the other folks who lived on the street who weren't from Puerto Rico. I didn't invent that idea. Nobody told it to me explicitly, but I got the sense from being in our culture that's been formed from generation after generation after generation. These socializing and historical forces that shape all of us are still operating today. And they have deep roots. And if we want to uproot them, we'll need to engage layers of ancestral trauma and historical silences and narratives of superiority and the ways in which we've been complicit in them and degrees of moral injury that we might have sustained along the way of whatever line we're living across. Alongside the socialization, the historical forces that perpetuate division are legacies of resilience and legacies of conscience on which we can draw. It's not all just bad news. When we dig into the past, there's both some of our grandparents, like mine, who arrived, in the words of theologians Elaine Enns and Ched Myers, as victimized but resilient refugees who assimilated into settler privileges. And so as we go through this series, we'll strive to wean ourselves off of whatever identities or histories that support that division that I'm talking about, and lean into this outward journey of restorative solidarity between people who have historically been turned against one another. This can be a challenging journey. It can be uncomfortable. But personal and spiritual growth most often is challenging and uncomfortable. But as Adrienne Marie Brown pointed out, there is an opportunity to see things anew. Things are not getting worse. They are being unveiled. History is not just in the past, as much as we are told otherwise. We are not free of history and geography. We should not avoid the pain, shame, anger, and guilt that may come with looking at things afresh. And so I appreciate your willingness to lean into that challenge this morning by engaging in a little bit of conversation with each other, which we don't normally do in our worship services. What I said earlier about places of safety and places of unsafety results in social isolation for so many of us. Isolated in the places that we feel safer, and isolated from the places that we don't feel as safe. And it ends up with a feeling of cut-offness that impoverishes us all. In the words of Enns and Myers, the cure is found in the shared struggle to turn our pathological, personal, and political history around, because it's killing all of us. How can we bring our individual and communal history to serve wholeness and justice and heal our haunted bodies and body politic? The deepest two layers of the colonial project in North America, going back over 500 years, the destruction of indigenous cultures and peoples and the violent removal of millions of Africans to the Americas and the transatlantic slave trade. Facing all of that, it becomes challenging to move from shame to healthy guilt, or what we call responsibility, to heal settler disorders like ignorance, our own unawareness, things that we've become dissociated from. So what was all around you growing up that was invisible to you? What was all around you in your home, in your town, that may have been invisible to you? This conversation, this topic, is about repair. Not blame, but about owning and not dismissing our past. Who our people were is who we still are in important respects. More than we realize, we are the products of the stories we carry and often reproduce unconsciously. It's better to understand this as picking up where our progenitors left off, where our ancestors left off, coming to terms with what was done and addressing that which was left undone. And so this series is intended to build a moral imagination, some spiritual resilience, some political courage. And the story that Tony did an amazing rendition of this morning, it comes from a myth that was created by Rabbi Isaac Luria of Safed. It's known as the Ari. And he transformed the meaning of the Jewish phrase tikkun olam, which literally means guarding the established order. He turned it into a new, more healing message, which gave meaning and purpose to the ethical structure of Judaism. It means both that we have a task and also that we have the capacity to complete that task. This myth that he created took place during the post-Reconquista. So, quick historical recap. Spain was run by the Muslims for many years, and then it was reconquered for the Christians. And so when it was still Muslim, it was called Al-Andalus, and it was a place where Jews and Christians and Muslims all lived together in relative peace. It wasn't perfect, but they lived together in relative peace. And so once it got reconquered, a lot of Jews fled there, because if they stayed in what became Spain, they had to convert. And so if they didn't want to convert, they had to go somewhere else. And so the Ari traveled to Palestine and lived there about a century after the Reconquista. And the metaphor of the shattered wholeness had a special resonance for somebody whose people had just been uprooted and had to go to this faraway land to maintain their own identity. In our own time, we might not have, on a conscious level, that same sense of a shattered wholeness. But when I think of the journey of my mother's parents, of experiencing the anti-Semitism of Central Europe in the early 20th century, of leaving the home of their birth for an entirely new land over 4,000 miles away, of learning a new foreign tongue, of striving to make it in this new land, of refusing to teach their children their native language because it would just seem like useless clutter in their brains. When we think how many different versions of a similar story there are on this continent, filled with the descendants of immigrants, of refugees, of settlers, of colonizers, that leaves so much of our own history shrouded in mystery, not knowing where we came from or who we are, we can start to tap into some of those strands and rebuild some of that wholeness that might be found just under the surface. And so we'll be digging more into this in the coming weeks, but for now, the question that I'll leave you with to consider over this coming week is, what do you know of your people and where they come from? And your people can be in a blood relation sense, can be in a spiritual relation sense. What do you know of your people and where they come from? And this question is part of this larger invitation to heed Dr. King's invitation to liberate ourselves from what has been deeply woven into our consciousness, to find ourselves anew, to tap those rivers that flow deep down in our souls, knowing that our desire for a more loving world has a larger story to it that we can uncover on our inward and outward journeys of transformation. And so part of how we find ourselves anew and tap into those rivers that flow down deep in our souls and build a more loving world is by investing in this congregation, in communities such as this, to do that work together so we're not having to do it by ourselves.
I just have one announcement today. It's kind of different to do an announcement in the middle. I kind of like to get it over with at the beginning. But we're having our upcoming 150th. This year is our congregation's 150th anniversary. So we're planning some celebrations around that. So on the 13th of January, we're having a fundraising concert with our own Jeremy Jacobson. And then another acoustic duo, Catman Dog. One of them
Dog
plays.
man cat.
One of them plays the violin, and the other one plays the guitar. It's pretty cool. So you can buy tickets on Eventbrite. The link is in the upcoming, or I can help you find that. Or you can pay cash to myself or my husband Tracy. It's $30 a ticket. It is appetizers are included. There's going to be a cash bar, so I think that'll be really fun. If anybody would like to volunteer to help the night before that day set up or clean up after, or if anybody's a bartender and wants to volunteer their bartending skills, so just let me know. And we do kind of need a head count, so if anybody's planning on buying tickets, if you could just let me know today so we can kind of include that in the head count. Thank you.
This year, we were able to collect over $4,300 this fiscal year for different charities because of you. And we were able to help 2 local families with Christmas this month with our giving tree, and each family got a card for $450. We'd like to show you a video of one of the families. I think.
Not that, guys. This.
Yeah, just for mommy, not for you yet.
I don't know. Okay, scary. Someone's coming. Oh, that's nice. What is that? A picture of? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
Thanks to everybody. It was all because of you. This is the last collection for the minister's discretionary fund. Remember, this goes to congregants or others that might need help throughout the next year, as Pastor Tom sees fit. The money in the baskets will go to sustaining the mission of our congregation. The money in the cups goes to, as I just said, the minister's discretionary fund. For those not with us in person, there is an online link for both one-time and regular donations. I need 4 volunteers. For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly thankful.
And now please rise and body for spirits join in singing hymn number 95. Really great hymn. There's more love of someone. Number 95.
Thank And now, may we have faith in life to do wise planting, that the generations to come may reap in even more abundantly than we. May we be bold in bringing to fruition the golden dreams of human kinship and justice. This we ask, that the fields of promise become fields of reality.
After the postlude, we will extinguish this flame, but we will continue to carry in our hearts
The light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment.
until we are together again.
Please join me. But first,
We've already said the words.
just do it. Happy New Year.
And for anybody who'd like to gather to discuss the worship service, we'll be doing that in 15 minutes right here. And so just please bring a chair from out in the parish hall if you'd like to do that.